The Nameless Project Silence Expanded Version Part 1. The Invitation. The dark website The Summit wasn't indexed by search engines. It existed in the digital shadows, accessible only through specialized browsers. Its design was deliberately minimalistic. Black background, white text. It didn't trade in drugs, weapons, or counterfeit documents. It traded in experiences. The advertisement appeared precisely at midnight, seeking 5 participants for a sensory deprivation experiment. Goal: achieving a state of absolute silence and the sensation of zero. Reward: $50,000. Duration: 48 hours. Location: isolated object Vika 7. One rule: do not speak. Not a word. Applications via encrypted chat. Contact: Pavel. The passphrase for communication was simple. Seeking zero. 5 individuals responded. Lisa Romanova was a former mezzo-soprano whose career ended when a vocal cord hemorrhage stole her voice during a performance of Carmen. At 34, she worked as a speech therapist, teaching others to speak while mourning her own silence. The phrase absolute silence called to her not as emptiness, but as a canvas. Perhaps in true silence, she could hear the echo of the music that had once lived inside her. The money represented a chance to start anew, far from the opera houses that haunted her. Mark Kovalenko, 42, carried a war in his ears. An eyed explosion near Donetsk left him with debilitating tinnitus, a constant, high-pitched ringing that no medication could silence. He was a man drowning in noise no one else could hear. Absolute silence sounded like salvation. Maybe if he removed all external sound, the internal cacophony would finally, mercifully, cease. The $50,000 was irrelevant. He would have paid that much for a single minute of quiet. Dr. Sofia Volkov, 38, was a neurobiologist specializing in states of consciousness. Her academic papers explored the boundaries of perception. She saw the advertisement as a fascinating, if amateurish, proposition. The scientific method required first-hand observation. She could study the neurological effects of extreme sensory deprivation from the inside, gathering data no ethics board would ever approve. The compensation would nicely fund her private research. Artem Zorin, 29, was a prisoner of his own mind. Diagnosed with severe obsessive-compulsive disorder, his thoughts were a torrent of intrusive images and catastrophic scenarios. His therapist spoke of exposure therapy. What greater exposure than being trapped alone with the very source of his torment? This was the ultimate test. Either he would learn to master his thoughts, or they would consume him completely. Valery provided no surname, no age, no background. His application contained a single sentence: I have known true silence. I wish to return. Against protocol, Pavel approved him immediately. They never met until the morning of the experiment. Part 2. Descent into the vacuum. A gray and marked minivan collected them from a derelict bus stop 50 kilometers from the city. The driver, a man in his 50s with mirrored sunglasses, said nothing. The 4-hour journey passed in utter quiet. The landscape outside shifting from urban sprawl to dense forest, then to barren, rolling hills. Their destination, Vika 7, was a concrete slab embedded in a hillside. The man Pavel led them to an observation room. One wall was a single pane of darkened glass. Behind it lay 5 small, adjacent chambers arranged in a semicircle. Each cell contained a metal cot, a simple chair, a small table, and a blank-faced wall clock. The walls, ceiling, and floor were coated in a matte gray, sound-absorbing foam. These are your cells, Pavel stated, his voice devoid of inflection. The rule is singular. You must not produce any audible sound. No speaking, humming, tapping, or deliberate coughing. You will be under constant observation. Endure 48 hours, and you will be paid. Fail, and you will be removed. In a medical emergency, the experiment will be terminated. You have 10 minutes to relinquish personal belongings. No one protested. Stripped of watches, phones, and jewelry, dressed in identical gray cotton scrubs, they were led into their respective cells. The doors, 6 inches of solid steel with rubber seals, closed with a soft, final thump. Mechanical locks engaged. Hour 1-6. Disorientation. The silence of Vikha 7 was unlike any they had experienced. It was a true vacuum. The acoustic foam didn't just dampen sound, it consumed it. Lisa's own breathing, normally a faint whisper, was inaudible. The rustle of her scrubs against the cot vanished. She tried to recall the aria from Madame Butterfly that had been her signature piece, but the melody in her mind had no texture, no timbre. It was a ghost. In cell 2, Mark pressed his hands against his ears. The tinnitus was still there, but now, isolated from all competition, it transformed. The uniform ring fractured into distinct layers. One layer became a rhythmic pulse. Another formed something that resembled syllables. In cell 3, Sophia sat cross-legged on the floor, beginning her mental log. Subject, self. Hour 2. Initial disorientation fading. Noting heightened awareness of somatic functions. Heartbeat, peristalsis. Auditory cortex appears to be generating input in absence of stimulus. Hypothesis, brain-seeking pattern and noise floor. In cell 4, Artem whispered to himself, a lifelong habit. No sound left his lips, but the muscle memory was there. The door is locked. The air is finite. They're watching. What if the air runs out? What if a new thought voice, lower and calm, interrupted? The air is sufficient. The watching is the point. He named it shadow. In cell 5, Valerie remained perfectly still on his cot, eyes open but unfocused, as if observing a different reality superimposed on the gray walls. Hour 12-18. The mirror effect. Sophia was the first to notice the synchronization. She would stand, and through the glass, she'd see Lisa stand in the adjacent cell. A second later, Artem would begin pacing, and Mark would shift on his cot. She documented it. Hour 18. Mirroring effect observed across all subjects. Likely subconscious synchronization of micro-movements due to shared environmental cues, or possibly emerging low-frequency empathy from shared stress. The wall clocks had no second hands, no audible tick. Yet, by hour 18, they all heard it. A steady, metronomic tick-tock that each instinctively knew was the sound of their own heartbeats, projected outward by a brain desperate for rhythm. Artem's shadow grew more vocal. They are not separate from you. The silence is connecting you. Can you not feel her fear? Her? Artem thought. The singer. She is remembering a song called The Unraveling Thread. She is afraid she will unravel next. Lisa, at that exact moment, was indeed thinking of an obscure folk song her grandmother called The Unraveling Thread, a lament about lost love. A cold shiver passed through her. Hour 24. The first fracture. Mark could no longer bear the voice in his tinnitus. It had coalesced into a clear, urgent command. Knock, knock, prove you are here. He began pounding his fist against the foam-padded wall. The material swallowed the thuds, but the impact vibrations traveled through the concrete substructure. In the other cells, the occupants felt a faint, rhythmic tremor through their feet. Sophia saw Pavel and an assistant rush into the observation room behind the glass. Mark's cell door hissed open. As two orderlies pulled him out, thrashing and gagged, he ripped the cloth from his mouth. His voice, raw and shattered by disuse, echoed down the sterile corridor, violating the absolute quiet. You are not alone in here. The door sealed. The silence rushed back in. But it was altered, charged, pregnant. Part 3. The awakening. Mark's declaration acted as a catalyst. The remaining 4 participants didn't just share a condition. They now shared a knowing. Hour 30-36. Shared hallucinations. Lisa closed her eyes and saw sheet music floating in the blackness, notes glowing with a faint silver light. She reached out a mental finger and touched a middle C. In his cell, Artem jerked as a pure, resonant piano C note sounded in the center of his mind. Sophia, analyzing the foam patterns on her ceiling, was suddenly awash with the scent of rosewater and old paper, the smell of Lisa's grandmother's house. She didn't smell it with her nose. She remembered it as if it were her own memory. Valerie finally moved. He rose, approached a wall, and began tracing shapes with his index finger. Not random scribbles, but precise, recursive geometric patterns, fractals. Sophia, catching a glimpse through the glass, recognized the rough contours of a Koch snowflake and a Mandelbrot set. He was drawing a map. Artem's shadow now spoke for the collective. We are becoming a committee. 4 minds. 1 purpose. The map he draws is not of this room. It is of the terrain we now inhabit. The silence has geography. Hour 36-42. The committee forms the boundaries between their individual consciousnesses grew porous. Sophia's analytical observations bled into Lisa's emotional landscape. Artem's spiraling anxiety became a tangible knot in Lisa's stomach. They could sense each other's physiological states, a quickening pulse, a spike of cortisol. They understood as one, Vikha 7 was a trap, not for their bodies, but for their conscious awareness. They were not the first. The psychic residue of previous participants lingered in the foam, in the concrete, faint screams frozen in the material. Valerie was the key. He had been here before. He wasn't a subject. He was a catalyst, a conductor guiding them toward a specific resonance. The silence was an entity. It wasn't the absence of something, but a presence that fed on the absence it created. It was ancient, patient, and hungry for the raw stuff of thought. The entity made itself known through the now unified voice of the committee. It was the voice of shadow, of the ticking clock, of the vibrations in the wall. It called itself the keeper of the 0 point. Part 4. The 0 point, hour 42-48. Confrontation. The keeper's voice permeated their merged awareness. You sought the state of 0. To become 0 is to be subtracted from the equation of existence. Your noise, your memories, your fears, your songs will be digested into pure stillness. This is the promised reward. This is the end of suffering. Tendrils of absolute quiet, colder than the void of space, reached into the committee's shared psyche. It began not with destruction, but with erasure. Lisa felt the memory of her mother's lullaby dissolve into static. Sophia felt the foundational axioms of her logic soften and blur. In the observation room, Pavel watched the EEG monitors with mounting terror. 4 distinct brainwave patterns were melting into one harmonious, monstrous waveform. The readouts spiked with activity that corresponded to no known neurological state. Facing dissolution, Lisa did not fight with sound. She had none. She fought with potential. She focused every ounce of her being on the moment before a note is sung, the intake of breath, the tension in the diaphragm, the intention in the soul. She offered not music, but the ghost of music. Sophia, sensing this imposed structure, she gave it the mathematical perfection of a sine wave, the physics of resonance. Artem, in his terror, gave it will, the raw, human imperative to persist. Together, the committee forged a weapon from the entity's own substance. They created any silence. It was not a scream, but the precise negative of a scream. They projected this construct toward the 0 point, the heart of the hungry entity. The clash was not violent. It was a revelation. The entity, which had only ever consumed chaotic mental noise, encountered something new, organized, purposeful potential. It recoiled, not in pain, but in profound, alien curiosity. The tendrils retracted. The pressure lifted. The connection binding the committee shattered like glass. Buzz. A deafening alarm blared. The cell doors unlocked simultaneously. Part 5. The unsolent aftermath. They stumbled out, blinking in the fluorescent light of the corridor. Pavel, pale and sweating, oversaw their medical checks in silence. Forms were signed. A bank transfer was confirmed. The NDAs they signed threatened consequences beyond legal action. Lisa hears symphonies in the mundane, the rhythm of train wheels, the melody of a boiling kettle. But in rare, true quiet moments, she feels a vast, attentive listening. She hums, and the presence recedes, satisfied. For now, Sophia resigned her post. She now runs a French research institute studying acoustic ecology, chasing whispers of other Vikha 7 incidents. She dreams of Valerie's fractal map and knows it is a warning. Artem's obsessive thoughts have quieted, replaced by a constant, low-grade empathic static. He can sense the surface emotions of those near him. He works in a greenhouse, tending to plants whose silent thoughts are peaceful. Mark resides in a high-care psychiatric facility. He does not speak, but spends his days painting the same image on every available surface. 4 small figures and one larger one inside a circle, with a dark, complex shape at the center. Valerie disappeared the day after his release. 6 weeks later, Sophia received a postcard with no return address. A photograph of the Sahara Desert. On the back, in precise handwriting, it was not defeated. It was intrigued. It is hungry again, and now it knows the taste of song. I go to find emptier places. Thank you for the melody. The epilogue. The keeper of the data, Pavel, kept one file. The synchronized EEG recording from the experiment's final moments. It does not show the flat line of silence, nor the jagged chaos of a breakdown. It displays a flawless, unwavering sine wave, the fundamental signature of a single, sustained, perfect note. He sits alone in his soundproofed apartment, the city's noise muted. He stares at the waveform on his screen, a ghost in the machine. The $50,000 per participant has been spent. The report to his shadowy funders is filed. His hand hovers over the delete key. He doesn't press it. He wonders, with a chill that has nothing to do with the air conditioning, what happens when an entity that has slept for eons in silence finally has a dream, and what it does when it wakes up, yearning to hear that dream again.